So if you missed it, Sony decided to lock down your Epic account that's tied to the PlayStation 4 version of Fortnite. What I mean by that is if you try to sign in with your Epic account, a third-party account, to the Switch, or I guess the Xbox, you can't do it. It just simply says it's tied to a PlayStation account, and you'll have to create a new one. In fact, it goes on further to say, well, if you want to do something about this, you just have to make a new account because we can't do anything about it, which implies that Sony is the one who is completely locking it down. Again, a third-party account. Yeah, it sounds weird because it is, but to be honest, this shouldn't surprise you at all, because we should have seen this one coming. See, Sony is currently suffering from something I called the PlayStation syndrome. It's an issue when, a company jumps so far out ahead, finds immense success, and is way above anyone else in the console space, that they can just do whatever they want. If they want to be anti-consumer, doesn't matter. It won't affect them, because they're winning by so much. The reason it's called the PlayStation Syndrome is because it's something I first noticed in 2006 when the PlayStation 3 was introduced. See, back then, the PS2 was ridiculous. It still is if you look back on its sales, and Sony controlled that market by over 100 million units from the next competitor. But the Xbox and GameCube meant nothing to them, and it was so clear as we went into 2006 when the PlayStation 3 was shown. It's very weird to see this because this is an extremely overconfident Sony. Even though Microsoft jumped onto the scene ahead of time with their Xbox 360 and found very, very good early success, Sony still decided to mark their price at $600, put a chip in there that was very difficult to develop for, probably because they thought their success with the PS2 meant, well, these guys are only going to want to develop for the PlayStation 3, and the consumers are definitely going to want to buy our system for $600, even though the 360 is much cheaper. Yeah, there was a $500 model, but it didn't have Wi-Fi. What's that? So that's kind of where the PlayStation syndrome comes from, to me anyway. And listen, it's not just Sony who has suffered from this. I'd go out to say all three of them have. If you look back in 2013 with something like the 360, well, that wrote itself. Go look at that E3. I talked all about it in a video. Or here's Don Matrick telling you what to do if you don't always want to be online with your Xbox One.
Could have arguably gone the other way if we didn't do it, and fortunately we have a product for people who aren't able to get some form of connectivity. It's called Xbox 360.
Right. So stick with 360. That's your message if you don't like it?
If you have zero access to the internet, that is an offline device. I mean, seriously, when I read the blogs and thought about who's really the most impacted, there was a person who said, hey, I'm on a nuclear sub.
Right.
And I don't even know what it means to be on a nuclear sub, but I've got to imagine that it's not easy to get an internet connection.
That's right. You need to buy the old system that games probably won't be developed for anymore after a year or two, because we're going to make you always be online. Hey, guess what? That peripheral to connect, it's coming with it. It's going to be $500 because of it, and it always needs to be plugged in. DRM, all over the system. That was an issue because Microsoft went into that generation confident. They did push the Sony PlayStation 3 around quite a bit, and while it did catch up, it was kind of when Microsoft just stopped caring about that generation anyway. So to them, who cares? In fact, in 2013, Sony was actually bending over backwards for consumers to win them back after the PS3. They even had those commercials where they made fun of Microsoft for being anti-consumer about their DRM and their Xbox One by doing things like, hey, here's how you share a game. You just hand it to somebody next to you. They did a lot of those. They beat them down about the price. It was seriously a complete flip-flop from what happened in 2006. And now it seems like Sony has kind of been showing their true colors as a company that doesn't really care as much about being anti-consumer ever since the PlayStation 4 took off to phenomenal success. The system is great. It's an awesome system. And honestly, I still look at the PlayStation 4 Slim at this point as probably being the best value for how much money you put in with the game series, a collection, and everything around it, and kind of the price for a more powerful system than even something like the Xbox One S. Just in general for gaming, it is probably a better value at about $300, maybe $250 if you find a deal. But that success has caused Sony to become ill again with the PlayStation syndrome. See, we now find out after crossplay is becoming a thing strangely this generation, something I didn't think would ever happen. Like if you asked me like back when the Xbox and the PS2 started getting online, even the GameCube a little bit, I would have said there's no way. You're never going to see these different systems play together on online games. To me, it just didn't make sense back then, but now we see it happening with the Switch and the Xbox and even the PC. Although the PC and the PlayStation 4 still kind of communicate, obviously, but PlayStation wants nothing to do with the Nintendo Switch and the Xbox. Okay, well, you know what? Here's the thing I say about that. It's Sony's system. They're allowed to not let it talk to the Switch and Xbox, as their strategy has become, we just have more PlayStations out there than anyone even has systems with those two combined with the Xbox and the Switch, so guess what? Too bad. You gotta go buy the system and that's the way it is. Whereas the Switch and the Xbox, like, hey, your friend's got an Xbox, you got a Switch, you guys can play together. Rocket League, right? Fortnite now. You guys can just play together. In fact, they've been going online with Major Nelson telling people how to connect their Fortnite account to Xbox Live so that it works with the Switch, just in case you need some help. Yeah, they're pushing for it, as Microsoft generally has. In fact, a while ago, Fortnite actually became cross-platform compatible online. Crossplay was enabled for about half a day. And it seemed like an accidental thing on Epic's side, and they had to turn it off right away, even though Phil Spencer said I would have liked to have seen it stayed on. They've pretty much said that, yeah, Sony made us turn it back off. And now they've made it so that it's locked down on their system, just with our third-party account. Something I think Epic is a little concerned to try to fix, because they don't want Sony to, I guess, kick them off their platform, which is crazy if you think about it, because Fortnite is like the most popular game ever right now. Even something like Rocket League, Psyonix has pretty much said it's a political issue why we can't do this. They've even said it's as easy as pushing a button. Well, technically a web page with a checkbox, as they said. So it looks like not only is Sony not at all interested in crossplay, they're interested in locking your account down to the PlayStation, which becomes a different issue. See, crossplay is their decision. Locking down a third-party account from Epic seems extremely anti-consumer, doesn't it? I feel like I look at that and I say, how are they allowed to do that? That seems weird, but apparently that's just the way it is with Sony, because they don't really need to bend over backwards to consumers. Most consumers have bought a PlayStation. Most consumers are going to continue buying a PlayStation, and their numbers won't slow down. They'll cross 100 million, no problem. What's interesting is when you see people so frustrated by this, who have generally been behind the PlayStation heavily, very, very much so, having issue with this, I feel like they are even starting to figure out, along with a lot of people, something that some of us have seen coming for a while, ever since that crossplay debacle came out and started showing up. Take a look at Greg Miller, for example. He's been a pretty big advocate for PlayStation. Had an entire podcast with Colin Moriarty called P.S. I Love You, XOXO. That's right, 2 X's. He's in pretty deep. But here's his tweet talking about, well, this issue as he experienced it firsthand. He didn't seem too happy. At PlayStation, fix this. Not allowing me to sign into Fortnite Switch with my Epic account because its link to PS4 is tone deaf and points more to fear than market dominance. It does the opposite of what you want. It makes me think about moving to Xbox for Fortnite. In fact, if you have thought about playing Fortnite on another system other than your Switch, you should be playing on an Xbox or PC. The PlayStation 4 is just not the best experience. It's not the best experience graphically, it's not the best experience portably, and it's not the best experience socially. See, the Switch, Xbox, PC can all play together. PS4 can't. I guess it can play with PC, but it can't play with can't play with Xbox or Nintendo Switch. If you have someone like Greg Miller, who did Podcast Beyond, can walk into a room of PlayStation fans at the PlayStation Experience, shout Beyond into the crowd, and they shout Beyond back, and he's against this and yelling at you, you might have a bit of a problem there, Sony. I would start to look at this and, like he says, maybe not be so tone deaf about it, or give us the outstanding response and explanation for why you can't do it. This was Jim Ryan last year explaining this whole situation, saying, we have a contract with the people who go online with us that we look after them, and they are within the PlayStation curated universe. Exposing what in many cases are children to external influences we have no ability to manage or look after. It's something we have to think about very carefully. So the translation I can give you here is, we want you to buy a PS4, not another system to play with your friends. We can do this because we are so far ahead, it doesn't matter if you think it's anti-consumer. Or I guess, think of the children, obviously. In fact, I think that's Nintendo's position at this point with things like voice chat. Although, Nintendo's going to support cross-platform voice chat. I don't know. I don't know what Sony's position is. It's obvious that it's anti-consumer. It's obvious because they're so far ahead, and they don't care. And that's okay for now. But Microsoft isn't making a lot of moves to try to get in the consumer's good graces. It's something they've been working on, I'd say, for the past, I don't know, when did the Xbox One launch? Since day one then. They've been working hard to get back into your good graces. And Sony hasn't really done any of that. Even Nintendo's kind of been working to try to repair their Wii U performance that was catastrophe right away, obviously. And here's Sony kind of, just coasting along. It's going to be interesting next generation, because what happens if Sony falls behind? What happens if the Xbox jumps out strong, comes out a year early, sells well? The only way Sony could really mess up what's going for them right now is if they pull another PlayStation 3. And that would be one of the worst things to see ever, because, well, then we'd have a really terrible system at that point that's too expensive. It makes no sense. I think Sony's learned their lesson. I don't think they're going to pull that again. Maybe just in general, consumers might get fed up with them, and if they keep doing stuff like that, that could happen. The PlayStation syndrome, it's kind of hard to shake, and it takes a lot of yelling and a lot of lost sales for you to get that habit kicked. But let me know what you guys think about this whole situation, about Fortnite accounts being locked down to Sony, and have you been kind of noticing some anti-consumer stuff kind of bubbling up in the Sony world? Do you think that's because they're just so far out ahead? And do you think that, well, there could be issues next generation if they don't really start to look at this, because everyone starts at zero next generation? I can tell you now, Microsoft's not going to show up next generation and pull a lot of anti-consumer stuff they pulled in 2013. And while PlayStation might not see the Switch as a competitive device, what happens if the Switch ends up climbing 60, 70 million, and then you'll see third parties move over, and you'll see consumers maybe spend more money on the Switch than they would on the PlayStation, just because. Okay, good news. Sony actually responded. I can't believe it either. They actually responded to the BBC about this whole issue. See, since I started doing this video, they have actually been started to kind of be pushed into the spotlight a bit, because mainstream media started covering this situation. You didn't think Fortnite was big before? Yeah, all the different mainstream media outlets are now covering it, and the BBC managed to actually get something back from Sony. So, this is what they had to say. We're always open to hearing what the PlayStation community is interested in to enhance their gaming experience. With more than 80 million monthly active users on PlayStation Network, we've built a huge community of gamers who can play together on Fortnite and all online titles. We're also offer Fortnite crossplay support with PC, Mac, iOS, and Android devices, expanding the opportunity for Fortnite fans on PS4 to play with even more gamers on other platforms. We have nothing further to add beyond this at this point. What?